Scripture is the blueprint to life and living.
They are sure of their mission.
Our role is to redeem the entire world.
And the stakes are high.
Do you really wish that you could have been martyred?
Yes, martyrdom was my biggest wish.
What they have in common:
God promised we would return to this land.
Jews, Christians, and Muslims.
This is the ultimate sacrifice, to give your soul as a gift to God, the Creator, and the country.
The belief that modern society has lost its way.
They're raping virgin teenage America on the sidewalk, and everybody's walking by and acting like everything's okay.
The problem we have now with these civilizations is we don't offer the man where to go. He doesn't know his place in life.
The people that don't keep the Torah, they don't understand the meaning of being Jews, they're wasting their life.
They say God is the answer.
I would like to see America become the nation under God again.
But their battle to save the world has caused anger, division, and fear.
I believe that Islam is a real threat.
Something's gone wrong. We've too closely fused politics and our faith.
I fear from those individuals who feel that they will go to heaven by killing me. I fear for my life.
Jerusalem, the ancient city filled with sacred meaning for three great religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I'm Christiane Amanpour. When piety meets politics, it can be a volatile mix, which is one reason Jerusalem, the so-called City of Peace, has been torn by centuries of war. Even today, the battle is led by men and women who believe their vision and sometimes violence are part of a divine script. We call them God's warriors. Whether Muslim, Christian, or Jew, millions of people view the world through a religious prism. They want God back in their daily lives, back to the seat of power. Tonight, and for the next 2 nights, we explore who they are, what they want, and why this is a battle they say they cannot afford to lose. God's Jewish warriors. Over the last 40 years, they have changed the course of history. Ignore them, and lasting peace in the Holy Land may be out of reach. Our story begins in the West Bank city of Hebron. The city is steeped in the history of patriarchs, prophets, and biblical kings. It is home to some of the most zealous of God's Jewish warriors. They are determined to settle the land that Israel captured from the Arabs in 1967. The settlers call it by its biblical name, Judea and Samaria. A few weeks ago, it took hundreds of Israeli riot police to evict Jewish settlers from just 2 illegally occupied apartments in a Hebron neighborhood. In the Jewish Bible, the Torah, the book of Genesis says God gave this land to the Jewish people. The 500 Jewish settlers of Hebron are surrounded by 140,000 Palestinians. Choosing to live here means risking their lives.
My mother was holding the telephone, and suddenly she heard screaming like she never heard in her life.
The screaming that night in 1998 was Tzipi Schlissel's father, 63-year-old Rabbi Shlomo Ra'anan.
This is the house that my parents used to live.
A Palestinian man had broken into her parents' house.
You see now where the terrorist came, went on this wall into the window.
The man who once held Tzipi as a little girl was now fighting for his life.
He was in his pajamas, and the terrorist was holding his hand, and my mother, tried to save my father and push him in the other hand, like my father was in the middle. And then the terrorist took the knife and he stabbed my father in his heart, and all the blood was like flowing all over. And my mother, she's a nurse, and she tried to save him, but it was impossible.
Despite everything, Tzipi, her husband, and their 10 children stay in Hebron, a few doors from her parents' house.
We have the Holy Land. It's where God says this is where the Jews has to live.
But it is also Palestinian land. The West Bank, it's west of the Jordan River, was designated by the United Nations to be the largest part of an Arab state.
Let them be in a different place. I didn't see any place in the Bible that it says there's green line, that you have to cut the land to half.
There are now more than 200 West Bank settlements and outposts, home to 240,000 Jews. Another 180,000 Jews live in East Jerusalem, land claimed by the Arabs as theirs.
We're looking here at the phenomenon of the suburban settlement.
All of this?
Right.
Gershom Gorenberg, an American-born Israeli, is a journalist and historian. So what is this, Gershom? We're going through, there's Israeli soldiers here.
We are passing through a major Israeli checkpoint.
Driving through checkpoints on West Bank highways, he showed me how the settlements reinforce Israel's control.
By placing the settlements between the Palestinian towns, it creates long fingers that run into the West Bank, and that makes it very difficult to create a contiguous Palestinian state.
Preventing a Palestinian state is precisely the point for right-wing settlers. They want Israel to annex the occupied land permanently, but not give the Palestinians who live there full democratic rights.
I feel it's like the one that killed my father. You never can trust them.
God's Jewish warriors look to the book of Ezekiel for inspiration. Ye shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers. This is central to their belief that only when the Jews return to their homeland and live their lives according to the Torah will the Messiah come to save the world.
The people that don't keep the Torah, they don't understand the meaning of being Jews, the meaning of the land, they wasting their life.
The impact of God's Jewish warriors goes far beyond these rocky hills. The Jewish settlements have inflamed much of the Muslim world.
You can't understand the anger of radical Islam unless you understand the conflict between Jews and Palestinians. This tiny piece of land matters much more to people than huge countries elsewhere in the world.
How God's Jewish warriors reshaped the Holy Land is a remarkable story. It's a story of rabbis who became politicians.
Are you asking if they misled the government? There's no doubt it was a political trick.
Housewives willing to confront their own soldiers.
I don't recognize any Palestinian right to ownership of this land.
And although the number is small, there are terrorists, Jewish terrorists, including some who would even kill Palestinian children.
One brings the car, one brings the explosives, one takes care of the clock, one lays the bomb, and that's how it works.
All in God's name. Hanan Porat is one of God's Jewish warriors. As he drives through his settlement on the occupied West Bank, nothing makes him happier than seeing the next generation. Their presence, he believes, is part of a divine plan for the redemption of the Jewish people.
Redemption will be good for the Jewish people and for the entire world.
As a young man, Porat studied to become a rabbi. At morning prayers, he straps on tefillin, leather boxes containing handwritten verses from the Torah. And he recites an affirmation of faith that dates from the Middle Ages.
Every day I say these words. I believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah.
50 miles and a world away, Yaakov Barnea lives in a suburb of Tel Aviv, Israel's most cosmopolitan city. His religion, he tells us, is classical music.
So the choir singing Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus. Hebrew, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. In English is Holy, Holy, Holy.
To him, the Messiah, in Hebrew the Moshiach, is a fairy tale.
I love the music, nothing about the Mashiach. I don't believe it.
Barnea grew up in a family where Judaism was more of a nationality than a religion. They did not go to synagogue, did not observe the Sabbath, and did not keep kosher.
Let's put it this way. I've always liked my sandwiches and my omelets with ham.
Hanan Porat, the devout, and Yaakov Barnea, the secular. Though they are two faces of Israel, they once shared a moment of history, a turning point for Israel 40 years ago. June 1967, the Six-Day War. With Egyptian troops massed at the border, Israel launched a devastating preemptive strike, destroying Egypt's air force, then its ground forces in the Sinai Peninsula. To the north, Israel fought off the Syrian army, and to the east, the Jordanian army. Barnea and Porat were ordered to Jerusalem. Their brigade attacked the Arab side of the city, East Jerusalem.
I had the awful feeling that our way to Jerusalem was going to be over dead bodies.
Casualties were heavy. But when the battle ended, Israel was poised to take Jerusalem's old city from the Arabs, including 35 acres of sacred ground. It was from here, according to Muslim scripture, that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven around the year 630. But Hebrew scripture puts the ancient Jewish temple in the same location, destroyed by the Romans in the year 70. For the next 1900 years, even the last remnant of the temple, known as the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, was lost to the Jews. But the 1967 war changed all that when Israel ordered its army to capture the old city. The soldiers entered here through the Lion's Gate. It's a short distance to the sacred sites. Soon the field commanders radioed headquarters. The Temple Mount is in our hands. Words the Jews had not been able to say for nearly 2,000 years.
And then you turned over here?
Yeah.
Yaakov Barnea was ordered to stand guard on the upper level, which includes a Muslim shrine.
What did you think when you saw not just the wall, but the mosque?
It made a big impression.
Holy.
Holy. Yeah, sure.
Hanan Porat went to the ground level, to the Wailing Wall.
When we gathered at the wall, our eyes opened and the tears began to fall.
Battle-hardened soldiers sang.
The ecstasy was amplified by the fact that on the eve of the war, Israelis feared destruction. They feared another Holocaust.
To Porat, it was a miracle.
I felt like we were making history, like something out of the Bible.
But to Yaakov Barnea, it was a military victory, pure and simple.
I don't know nothing about God in this matter of fighting.
After the war, Barnea went on to a successful career in advertising.
I went back to work, I went back to my family, to live a normal life in a normal country.
But life would not be normal. Israel now ruled 1 million Arabs in 26,000 square miles of occupied territory.
A very, very intense debate began within Israel of what it meant, what to do with it, what should be the future of those territories.
In the euphoria of victory, some spoke of a biblical prophecy come true. Among them, Hanan Porat. He had a vision for the conquered land, and he was certain whose side God was on.
Do you have any doubt?
When we come back, God's Jewish warriors create facts on the ground.
I wouldn't call it lying. It was more like we got the land in a roundabout way.
And later, Jewish settlers turned to terror.
The bomb went off the minute I stepped on the clutch.
And a plot to destroy one of Islam's holiest sites.
They could change by that the whole history of the Middle East.
Cyprus, the year-round island.
I could do anything for you. Would you do anything for me too? Anything for you.
In business, 68% of Swedes believe that you have to be prepared to defend your territory, while 65% of Italians think that giving way is a sign of weakness. For Indians, however, 38% believe that success often comes from the unlikeliest of partnerships. Different points of view are welcome here. HSBC, the world's local bank.
Six days that changed history. The 1967 Six-Day War. It put the heartland of biblical Judaism under Israeli control. Hanan Porat wanted to make sure it stayed that way.
כי
We felt this was the time to seize the moment.
He and a small group of religious activists began planning a return to the land his parents once farmed, a community called Kfar Etzion in the now occupied West Bank.
We were returning home and fulfilling the prophecy.
But the Israeli government was divided. Trade the captured land for peace or keep it and build Jewish settlements. But would settlements even be legal? In researching his book, The Accidental Empire, Gershom Gorenberg discovered in Israel's archives these documents marked top secret. Written in September 1967 by Foreign Ministry lawyer Theodore Meron, the memos are a warning that civilian settlement contravenes the explicit provisions of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which protects people living under occupation.
It means that it violated international law.
But if Theodore Meron's legal opinion was correct, how is it that Israelis would build as many as 250 settlements and outposts in the middle of Arab land?
The legal advisor of the Foreign Ministry doesn't tell us how to defend our lives.
President Shimon Peres, one of Israel's longest-serving and highest-ranking politicians, initially supported settlements.
Are you saying Theodore Meron was wrong?
I don't know if he was right or wrong from a legal point of view, but he was wrong from a pragmatic point of view. Israel was under a steady attack all the time.
So just to help me understand this, for the Israeli leadership at the time, pragmatism triumphed over international law.
What you call pragmatism was in our eyes...
You just said pragmatism.
Pragmatism in the sense of security, of defending our lives, yes.
President Peres now says getting rid of most of the settlements is key to a lasting peace. Israel's official position is that its settlements do not violate international law. It calls the West Bank disputed territory, not occupied, because it says it was never a recognized independent country.
The real problem is, you can call it pragmatic, you can call it legal. Was the war over? It was not.
40 years later, we spoke to Theodore Meron, a Holocaust survivor who became one of the world's most respected authorities on international law. He stands by his top-secret memos to the Israeli leaders.
You can justify a lot of things on grounds of security, but you cannot settle your population in occupied territories.
No doubt in your mind?
No doubt.
No wiggle room in the law?
Not really.
Certainly when somebody can present you the Torah and the Bible and say, look, this is our land, then any man-made law is in confrontation with God's law.
I cannot argue with the Word of God. Any lawyer can only discuss things from the secular perspective. In other words, I do not believe that religion can resolve legal disputes.
But to religious activists, God's law trumped all others. Hanan Porat went ahead with his plan to resettle Kfar Etzion. Sympathetic government officials downplayed it with a cover story that it was a legally authorized military post. And that's what the sign out front said.
Everybody knew this was no military post. It was all just a show.
So the settlers took down the sign and used it as a doormat.
That tells you how we felt as people who were there as civilians and not as soldiers.
Another group of Jews went to Hebron and rented rooms in an Arab-owned hotel. It was just for a few days of religious study and to celebrate Passover, or so they said.
Are you asking if they misled the government? There's no doubt it was a political trick.
The people who led this effort made it very clear that the reason that they were doing it is that they wanted Hebron to remain under Israeli rule.
When the Jews announced they were staying, This time, Israeli officials worried there would be a confrontation with Hebron's Arab residents. The settlers eventually agreed to move just outside the city, temporarily. But over time, that temporary compromise became a permanent settlement, Kiryat Arba. Population today, 7,000.
The decision to let them stay was essentially a victory for the settlers and a defeat for those in the government who opposed the move.
It would take another war in 1973 to transform the small band of settlers into a religious and political mass movement that would change the face of the Holy Land. This time, Israel fought an uphill battle after a surprise attack by Arab armies on the Jewish holy day, Yom Kippur. Even though victorious, Israelis now felt vulnerable.
A certain complacency had set in after the 1967 victory in Israel.
Religious historian Karen Armstrong.
Israelis thought they were invincible. This gave them a real shock, and they felt acutely their isolation. And among the religious, it was felt that secular Zionism had failed.
God's Jewish warriors claimed to have the solution, an all-out campaign to settle the West Bank. Their movement took a name, Gush Emunim, the Block of the Faithful. One of the most faithful, Yehuda Etzion. When he saw this Israeli military base being built high on a West Bank hill, Etzion and his friends convinced the contractor to hire them. Then they moved into these dilapidated buildings near the job site. Using the name of a biblical town in the book of Joshua, they posted a sign, Ofra Work Camp. Was it really a camp for workers?
That and more. We came here to build a settlement.
So you tricked them, you kind of lied about your intentions.
I wouldn't call it lying. It was more like we got the land in a roundabout way.
Roundabout, and like the earlier schemes, effective. Ofra grew, and so did popular support for the settlers.
Remember, this is the 1970s. This is at the same time that Islamic radicalism is rising in the Muslim world. It's the same time that fundamentalists are returning to politics in the United States. Religion, which had been written off as a factor in the politics of the modern world, was suddenly returning to the political arena.
In Israel, a right-wing leader named Menachem Begin was elected prime minister in 1977 on a platform of keeping what the religious believed was the biblical land of Israel. It was a victory for God's Jewish warriors. And at Ofra, a new sign went up, "Keep off the grass." The settlers were here to stay.
I want you all as close to me as possible. Mazel tov.
6,000 miles from Israel's settlements, in the heart of Manhattan, defiance of international law comes dressed in diamonds. Here, Shani and Dov Heikind, two of God's Jewish American warriors, are a whirlwind of schmooze.
Good to see you, Mike. Thanks for being here.
She is the daughter of a prominent rabbi.
Mazel tov.
He is a New York State representative. A power couple. They met in the 1970s working for Meir Kahane, the notorious Brooklyn rabbi whose motto was "For every Jew, a 22." The Heikinds have gone from being Kahane's street fighters to these fancy feeding grounds. Here, they carefully cultivate American Jewish support.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
For a controversial mission. Jewish settlement of the occupied territories and East Jerusalem.
The people who went to some of these areas really believe in something
Most of us just believe in making another buck. I don't know why anyone would object to it.
They object, his critics do, because Jewish settlements violate international law. That's according to a 2004 opinion from the International Court of Justice.
My government believes that international law sets the appropriate standards.
From the earliest days of the settler movement, the United States, Israel's closest ally, blasted Israel's settlement policy.
Substantial resettlement of the Israeli civilian population in occupied territories, including in East Jerusalem, is illegal.
Ever since, American presidents, both Democrat and Republican, have spoken from virtually the same script. They consistently opposed settlement growth.
The United States will not support the use of any additional land for the purpose of settlements.
The United States policy was that there should be no more settlements.
I know that our nation has differences with the nation of Israel over settlements.
Israel must remove unauthorized outposts and stop settlement expansion.
Hi, Dove.
But with a smile and a song, they ignore their government's policy. The Haikins are Orthodox Jews who believe God's promise to the Jewish people includes the occupied territories.
The only answer to Arab terror is to give me more neighbors.
And they aren't the only ones. Federal tax records show at least 35 American charities dedicated to supporting the settlements. According to these records from 2003 and 2004, these organizations spent more than $67 million, all perfectly legal. And since the money goes to support charitable projects like parks and education centers, the contributions are even tax deductible.
This man's building Jerusalem every day. With every breath, Mel Wadler is involved in keeping Jerusalem united with Jewish life. It's his heart and soul.
Israel will never have peace as long as they are confiscating and colonizing Palestinian land.
I spoke with former President Jimmy Carter, who has written a controversial book that's critical of Israel and its settlement policy.
You have said that settlements are a real obstacle to peace.
There's no doubt in any rational analyst's mind that the settlements are the major obstacle to peace.
But on the other hand, many people say actually it's Palestinian suicide bombers that are the major obstacle to peace.
Well, there's no doubt that any sort of attack by Palestinians or others is horrible and must be condemned. But the basic problem is the settlements and the lack of an accommodation between Israel and the Palestinians, and Israel's withdrawing from Palestinian land.
But that's like probably a joke, right? Because there is no peace process. And there hasn't been a peace process. There's been a blood process.
It's Jerusalem!
This fundraiser is for Shani's Jerusalem Reclamation Project, which raises about $1 million a year to help another organization which buys Arab property in East Jerusalem to make the city more Jewish.
I appreciate every single dollar for Jerusalem.
Shani's backers invoke God's name, in Hebrew, Hashem, to help them buy land.
When we ask Hashem Yerushalayim, it means that Hashem will send one Arab that will sell a building in the old city. And then we need a Jewish to come and buy this place.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Dove, the professional politician,
Aleichem Shalom, how you doing?
gives these prayers some political muscle. Our review of the available New York Board of Elections financial disclosure records from 1999 until October last year shows Heikind has given nearly $40,000 from his own campaign war chest to pro-settlement organizations, his second largest expense.
How can any Jew say that there is no spiritual relationship between a Jew and Hebron? Because if you say that, then let me say right now, Jews have no right to any of the land of Israel.
Well, I'm looking for a house.
These days, Shani and Dove Heikind are house hunting themselves in the occupied territories.
You can own a piece of the rock, as they say in America.
For the Heikinds, it's more than a real estate investment.
people who believe and are willing to sacrifice and willing to put themselves where their mouth is. That's amazing stuff.
And even though the U.S. government officially opposes expansion of the settlements, the Haikins are recruiting others to join them.
I know you're not going to put this on, but those who call me a radical, aren't they the real radicals? Because they represent a much more segment than I do. I represent a hell of a lot of people.
When we come back,
Some might say this building became the most powerful arm of American foreign policy, more powerful than Foggy Bottom.
how a powerful special interest group in Washington helps God's warriors in the West Bank. And later,
I've buried many friends who have been murdered by Arabs.
a West Bank settler tells us the proper response is revenge.
God's revenge being a sign of justice.
We want to teach healing out of unwanted homosexuality.
Getting rid of gay.
These two things and these two things, they just don't fit.
They say it's a cure for homosexuality.
We want kids to know you can choose.
But is it a con?
It's a fraud. They're destroying families. It's an absolute tragedy.
They tell you to become more masculine as a guy by calling your friends a dude.
I accuse the ex-gay movement of being complicit with murder.
Gay conversion, only on CNN.
Every day, CNN comes across extraordinary people making a difference. We call them CNN heroes. Go to cnn.com/heroes. See what a real hero looks like or nominate one you know. CNN Heroes.
Tomorrow, meet God's Muslim warriors. The fight to make Islamic the only law. And the small extreme fringe that has become the world's nightmare. Tomorrow on CNN.
For decades, the U.S. has said Jewish settlements in the occupied territories are an obstacle to peace. So why not withhold some of America's generous foreign aid to pressure Israel? I asked former President Jimmy Carter.
America gives Israel $3 billion a year, no questions asked, just about. Why doesn't it say, okay, no more $3 billion?
There's no way that a member of Congress would ever vote for that and hope to be reelected.
John Mearsheimer, a prominent political scientist at the University of Chicago, co-authored one of the most controversial essays of late, arguing pro-Israel advocates have too much influence on American policy.
The lobby goes to great lengths to make sure that U.S. policymakers privilege Israel over the Palestinians.
The pro-Israel lobby he's talking about is a loose coalition of PACs, professional lobbyists and grassroots activists.
Thanks, Michael. Always great. Thanks.
Yes.
Morris Amitay runs Washington PAC, which funds pro-Israel politicians. I spoke with him at his office in the same building where he once ran AIPAC.
Some might say this building became the most powerful arm of American foreign policy, more powerful than Foggy Bottom, State Department.
Not really.
No?
It's powerful because you have the Governors Association here, the Attorney General's Association,
and AIPAC.
35 states, and you had AIPAC.
Amitay is an insider with more than 30 years' experience in what he calls the pro-Israel community.
How do you explain the fact that it is so powerful? The Jewish community in the United States is not huge, it's not massive,
No, I really don't think that we're that powerful. The way supporters of Israel present themselves to the administration and to the Congress is always in what is in the best interests of the United States.
To the right, a little bit that way.
They are primarily secular organizations.
Our good friend, Senator Harry Reid.
But the lobby's political clout has helped the staying power of religious settlers in the West Bank.
The United States has never been able to put serious pressure on Israel to halt settlement building. And of course the reason is because of the power of the lobby.
Except in 1991, when then President Bush did pressure Israel on the settlement issue, and a very public feud erupted with the lobby. President George Bush and his Secretary of State James Baker were trying to push Israel into peace talks with the Palestinians.
Nothing has made my job of trying to find Arab and Palestinian partners for Israel more difficult than being greeted by a new settlement every time I arrive.
So the Bush administration took an unprecedented step. U.S. loan guarantees for housing in Israel would now come with strings attached.
We will support our loan guarantees if there is a halt or an end to settlement activity.
Those were fighting words.
I've heard today there were something like 1,000 lobbyists on the Hill working the other side of the question. We got one lonely little guy down here doing it.
There were 1,000 lobbyists, many from the powerful American Israel Public Affairs Committee, known as AIPAC. Its annual convention in Washington sends members out to work the Hill. On the issue of loans, Congress got the message.
We should stick with our friends.
Just not the right or fair way to treat an ally.
By forcing the fight, the president gets in the way of the peace process.
President Bush vowed to stand firm.
I'm not going to shift the foreign policy of this country because of political expediency. I can't do that and have any credibility worldwide.
But just a few months later, the very week of the Republican National Convention, the pro-Israel lobby had something to celebrate.
President Bush announced his support for the loan guarantees.
And to this day, no other administration has so publicly threatened to withhold financial support because of the settlements.
We've been able to promote strong, close U.S.-Israel relations.
For Israel's friends on Capitol Hill, the pro-Israel lobby writes legislation, offers free trips to Israel, and contributes money.
No real secrets. They do all the things that we're permitted to do in a democracy.
As for political enemies, pundits still talk about the drubbing Senator Charles Percy took in 1984.
They pressured me, they threatened me.
Percy had supported selling high-tech military planes to another U.S. ally, Saudi Arabia. Pro-Israel activists spent millions to bankroll his opponent's campaign, and Percy lost.
Since then, they've said they will Percyize senators that don't adhere to their policy.
Most recently, former President Carter was criticized for criticizing Israel's treatment of the Palestinians in his book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid.
You're an anti-Semite.
It's very difficult to speak publicly in criticism of Israel.
And let me explain why I think you're a bigot, a racist, and an anti-Semite.
I've been publicly called anti-Semitic, even in full-page advertisements in the New York Times.
I think they were not only trying to marginalize and silence Carter by smearing him, they were also sending a message to anyone else in the body politic who had thoughts about criticizing Israel.
Morris Amatei says he doesn't consider Carter or Mearsheimer anti-Semitic, simply misguided.
Promoting an agenda in which Israel is the bad guy. Basically, the United States and Israel have the same goals in the Middle East. Peace, prosperity, keeping terrorists out. I just think that the success of the pro-Israel community is the fact that they have good arguments on their side.
Arguments and political clout that have kept foreign aid flowing, while religious settlers continue to count their blessings. When we come back,
we need to kick it up a notch.
God's Christian and Jewish warriors unite. And later,
we wanted to protest the demolition, but nobody intended to harm anyone.
But they ended up with an angry and bloody civil war.
The Boardroom, in association with RICO. Create, share, and think as one.
Oh, look, I think the absolute key thing is do something that you believe in, that you want to do, rather than something that you think is just going to make money. We certainly didn't sort of set this up because we thought it was going to be a ticket to wealth. And I think, you know, I think any business that you've got to believe in it. It's got to be something that you really think that, you know, whatever I'm creating, I really need it, and therefore there are lots of other people out there who really need it. And if that works, fantastic. You know, if it doesn't work, well, you have fun trying anyway. But I think to sort of think, oh, you know, there's money in this, but I really don't like the idea. How boring.
And what advice, Maureen, would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
I think that's the best advice. Just do it because it's a passion. You know, love it.
このリポートを明日の朝までに仕上げといてくれ。はい。
शाम तक ये सब देंगे।
Il y a 3 choses à faire. La mise en page, les titres.
At RICO, we believe the sun should never set on a good idea. With our global network and local support, we can help you create, share, and think as one. RICO.
Good to see you.
Sandra Osterberas is an Orthodox Jew.
You look beautiful.
Doing an unorthodox job.
If you had asked me 10 years ago what I would be doing with my life, I don't think I would have told you I'd be in church.
Sandra stumps for money from evangelical Christians to support Jewish settlements in the occupied territory, land she calls Biblical Israel.
Great.
Tonight, she's visiting Pastor Gary Cristofaro at his First Assembly Church of God in Melbourne, Florida.
If it wasn't for what the Jews brought to Christianity, there would be no Christianity.
Pastor Gary and his flock take their Jewish roots so seriously, they hold services on Friday night, the Jewish Sabbath.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.
This is not only religious ritual, they support Israel, which to them includes Jewish settlements on the occupied West Bank.
There is a promise to those who bless Israel to be blessed, those who curse will be cursed.
Back in Israel, Sandra takes church members on tours of the settlements in the occupied territories.
This land is ours. You cannot occupy something that already belongs to you.
And they've donated more than $100,000 to support them. Gary Cristofaro and Sandra Osterberas are part of a growing alliance between evangelical Christians and Israel.
We are celebrating Israel tonight.
A recent poll found that 59% of American evangelicals believe Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
When you give, it may be that you give in an envelope and put it in a bucket, but in actuality, an angel is going to scoop it up.
Those of you who are helping 2 Jews or more, we would like to say thank you by sending you this box of blessings.
One of the most successful Jewish fundraisers, Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein,
Shalom,
raised $39 million last year from Christian Zionists to fund human services and humanitarian work in Israel and in the Jewish settlements. And when Christian Zionists turn out in the thousands to demand that Washington politicians support Israel, the politicians respond.
Greetings from the President of the United States. This letter from George Bush.
Amen? Okay.
Sandra says God called her to do this work. She left her high-powered, high-paid job as a Wall Street lawyer and moved to Israel in 1984.
Because I was never fully American. I was Jewish.
Judaism was not only Sandra's religion, but also her nationality.
We learned how to read Hebrew before we learned how to read English.
Her parents, who narrowly escaped the Holocaust, sent her to Zionist summer camps, which championed the Jewish homeland.
My parents felt very safe in America, but there was always a part of them that said there needs to be an Israel in the event that we have another Hitler.
Sandra moved her family to Karnei Shomron, a settlement inside the occupied West Bank.
Just by building my house, I was strengthening the Jewish presence here in Samaria.
In 2002, a Palestinian suicide bomber blew himself up inside a pizza parlor in her neighborhood, killing 3 children.
I am a daughter of Abraham.
This is Sandra's way of fighting back.
If we give any part of that land to the Arabs, we are looking at terrorism.
Back in Florida, Gary Cristofaro's congregation responds with money.
We need to kick it up a notch.
All the while singing a prayer for peace in perfect Hebrew. Their money builds parks, childcare centers, and music therapy programs, projects that make Jewish life here more comfortable and more permanent.
If you don't live somewhere, if you don't take possession of it, it is not yours.
Some say Jews and evangelical Christians make strange bedfellows, especially given the history of anti-Semitism in the church.
Because of this doctrine of a Jew being a Christ killer, so much hatred and anti-Semitism has been propagated throughout the earth.
We are going to win in Israel.
Now that historic anti-Semitism has given way to an urgent support of Israel.
His presence is here tonight.
Some evangelicals believe that when Jews live in all of the Holy Land, what they call Greater Israel, only then will Christ return and true believers be raptured up to heaven.
You could get raptured out of this building before I get through finished preaching. We are that close to the coming of the Son of Man.
It is a controversial issue here in Israel as to whether we should be partnering with the Christians in any way.
Controversial in part because in the Judgment Day scenario embraced by some evangelicals, Jews who don't convert to Christianity burn in hell. But Sandra isn't worried.
I know that I'm not going to burn in hell because I didn't accept Jesus, because I don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. So how could I possibly be threatened?
Pastor Gary Cristofaro says God will decide if the Jews get to heaven, not him. As for Muslims, his views are extreme.
Jews and Christians cherish life. Islam teaches a doctrine of death. I'm equating it with a pagan religion, and all pagan religions, I believe, are satanically inspired.
Even Sandra concedes the alliance between God's Jewish and Christian warriors may seem odd to some, but if Sandra is anything, she is practical.
Israel has many enemies. We have to take advantage of every single one of our friends.
When we come back,
According to the customary definition, I am a terrorist.
The Jewish underground and vigilante justice. And later, a warning for God's warriors fighting over Jerusalem.
If this is transformed into a religious conflict, we will be transforming the conflict into a combination of Armageddon, jihad, holy war, sons of darkness and sons of light.
There is an outstanding airline traveling the world, flying to over 150 destinations worldwide with a young and modern fleet. The fastest growing airline in Europe, offering great hospitality, high standards, and aiming ever higher. Turkish Airlines welcomes you to a pleasurable experience in flying. Turkish Airlines, beyond your expectations.
Reporting. We're live from Johannesburg. We're live in
Coming in September on CNN, business in the Middle East. It's transforming and it's growing. Track the changes with CNN's newest business show, Marketplace Middle East. Be the change through weblogs and video diaries. Extraordinary young men and women record their experiences as they aim to benefit others. Richard is on a quest for rock and roll, with lessons in rock attitude from Motley Crue's Nikki Sixx and legend Alice Cooper. In September, stay connected. Stay with CNN.
I'm Colleen McEdwards at CNN Center with the headlines. U.S. President George W. Bush out to make the case that history will show the Iraq War was worth it. He will use a speech before a veterans convention today, about an hour from now, to urge patience, and we'll bring it to you. We've seen excerpts already, and they indicate that he will compare the war to Vietnam, saying the American pullout from that country led to agonies for millions of innocent citizens. Now, Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki says no one has the right to set a timetable for his elected government. He didn't say specifically who he was talking about, but his comments came a day after members of the Bush administration criticized the al-Maliki government for failing to follow through on some key legislative reforms. A suicide bomber rammed a police station in the Iraqi town of Baiji, some 250 kilometers north of Baghdad. At least 28 people were killed. Many of the 90 people wounded in the attack were taken to a hospital in Tikrit, where they were treated. And the U.S. military says 14 of its troops were killed when their Black Hawk helicopter crashed during nighttime maneuvers in northern Iraq. The military says there is no evidence of hostile fire. The family of an Iranian-American scholar is worried about her health and whether she will be able to leave Iran. Haleh Asfandiari was released from an Iranian prison Tuesday after 4 months behind bars. But her lawyer says she still faces charges of endangering national security, and she has no passport to travel. Iran has charged 3 other Iranian Americans with security-related offenses as well. 2 are still in prison. 1 is free, but is also barred from leaving Iran. Mexico's east coast is getting ready to tangle with Hurricane Dean. It's now a Category 1 storm, but it is picking up strength and getting bigger as it crosses Campeche Bay. Forecasters expect Dean to reach land within the next several hours. Dean tore across the Yucatan Peninsula Tuesday as a rare Category 5 hurricane, toppling trees, downing power lines, damaging buildings in its path. And those are the latest headlines for you. I'm Colleen McEdwards at CNN Center. We'll be back in about an hour. More news on your world today, 1 hour from now, including those remarks from the U.S. President George W. Bush. But now we return to our CNN special presentation, God's Jewish Warriors.
A Jewish underground and a trail of blood. When politics and piety collide, God's Warriors continues. Christian Amanpour reports.
Yehuda Etzion is publishing books these days, but he's better known for planting bombs. You were convicted, you spent time in prison. You were a terrorist then?
Maybe. What can I do?
Much of the world remembers this historic day in 1979 as a symbol of courageous diplomacy. President Jimmy Carter pushing old enemies, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, to forge a new peace. Begin had always been a hero to the settlers. Now, in exchange for peace with Egypt, he was giving back part of what Israel had captured in 1967. To many of God's Jewish warriors, this was blasphemy and betrayal.
It's completely forbidden to give up what we already have. Nobody has the right to do it.
Yehuda Etzion was an early leader in the movement to settle the occupied territories. Like many religious settlers, he believed there was a higher authority than Israel's political leaders. But he went to extremes, plotting to literally dynamite the peace process, with a vigilante group that became known as the Jewish Underground.
I had served in the army, and I knew how to use explosives.
In 1980, after 6 Jewish students were murdered in the West Bank city of Hebron, the Jewish Underground conducted its first operation. You and your group of conspirators, you decided to take revenge.
You know, in the Jewish tradition, the period of 1 month has a special meaning. It's the period of mourning. So we decided a timetable of 1 month.
And so they planted bombs in the cars of Palestinian mayors in 3 West Bank cities. One of them, Bassam Shaka, the mayor of Nablus.
The bomb went off the minute I stepped on the clutch. My legs were instantly blown off. They tried to save my knee in this leg, the longer one, so they kept it. But within 2 days, I had gangrene and almost died.
Bassam Shaka and the others were targeted because the Jewish Underground believed they were behind the 6 killings in Hebron. But the Underground was wrong, according to Carmi Gilon, the former chief of Israel's internal security agency, Shin Bet.
And those mayors, we had no information that they were involved in any terror act.
The car bomb attacks remained unsolved for years, until 1984, when Shin Bet uncovered a plan to bomb Arab buses in East Jerusalem. One arrest led to others, and ultimately to the most sensational plot of all.
We said that with explosives, we would destroy the Dome of the Rock.
The Dome of the Rock is Islam's third holiest site, a 1,300-year-old shrine towering over this enormous outcropping of limestone. Sitting nearby on a throne-like chair, Jerusalem's top Muslim cleric told us why the rock is so important.
We consider this to be the spot where the Prophet Muhammad began his ascent to heaven.
But Jews also revere this spot as the site of their ancient temple, which Etzion believes must be rebuilt for the redemption, the coming of the Messiah.
There is no redemption without the temple. Redemption without the temple is like trying to revive someone without a heart.
Etzion and his co-conspirators believed blowing up the Dome of the Rock would undo the peace with Egypt and make room for the Jewish temple. With 600 pounds of explosives diverted from army stockpiles, they had more than enough.
Damaging the holy shrine would lead to repercussions, the scale of which I can't even imagine.
Excuse me, do you have anything you want to say following the end of this trial? Do you think justice was done?
I'm not speaking with somebody that I don't know who is.
Etzion and his co-conspirators were found guilty. And after spending 7 years in prison, he now says he repudiates terrorism.
Vigilantes don't have the right to take the law into their own hands.
Instead, he hopes his books on religious philosophy will spread his vision of a Jewish Messiah to be embraced by everyone, Jews, Christians, and even Muslims.
In the long run, I see it as the key for eternal peace, not just here, but in the whole world.
As for the politicians, 2.5 years after that historic handshake, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat was assassinated by Muslim extremists opposed to peace with Israel. God's Jewish warriors also opposed the peace deal. But Menachem Begin honored the treaty he had signed, evicted Jewish settlers from the Sinai, and demolished their homes. Begin would eventually make amends with the settlers, and over the next 10 years, 40 new settlements went up in the occupied West Bank. In the years ahead, another prime minister would shake hands with another Arab leader, and this time, one of God's Jewish warriors would resort to murder. At a ceremony at the White House in 1993, two mortal enemies, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, signed a peace treaty. The deal included withdrawal from part of what Israel captured in the Six-Day War. It was a historic step towards an independent Palestinian state.
Enough of blood and tears. Enough.
Yaakov Barnea, the secular Israeli who helped capture East Jerusalem in 1967, was hopeful.
I had a tremendous appreciation for those who made it happen, and for Rabin's courage in going this way.
But Hanan Porat, who also fought in the Six-Day War, opposed the creation of a Palestinian state.
If you think we are messianic with our beliefs, then what they think, those who believe in peace with the Palestinians, is pure mysticism.
To God's Jewish warriors, turning land over to the Palestinians would just bring more blood and more tears.
Rabin is going
with the Palestinians against Israel because he's blind.
It was especially difficult to accept because Rabin had been a military hero since Israel's creation.
And yet, he was willing to make peace for the Palestinians.
Religious historian Bruce Lawrence.
All of the people whom we describe as fundamentalists have rhetoric which talks about good and evil, but the greatest evil is the Jew who's compromised. And so Rabin becomes a symbol of the real enemy.
3 months after that strained handshake, Jewish settlers at this intersection in Hebron were hitchhiking to Jerusalem. Among them were members of Meir Lapid's family. A Palestinian car drove by.
I saw Jewish people. He pulled the trigger and started to kill.
Lapid's brother Shalom was shot in the chest. His father Mordecai was shot in the head. You blame your leadership?
Of course.
As father and son lay bleeding, a doctor from the nearby Jewish settlement rushed to the scene. The doctor, an American named Baruch Goldstein, was active in an ultra-right-wing political party.
He tried to save their lives.
And?
And they were died in his hands.
How do you think it impacted Baruch Goldstein to see your father and your brother dying right here in his arms?
I think it killed him. He was not anymore alive.
Three months later, Baruch Goldstein went to Hebron, to the tomb of the patriarchs. Both Jews and Muslims pray here because Abraham is the patriarch of both religions. Goldstein entered during Muslim prayers with an assault rifle and opened fire. He killed at least 29 Palestinians and wounded 150 others before Muslim worshippers beat him to death.
God bless the Jewish people. Am Yisrael Chai.
Among the estimated 1,000 mourners at Baruch Goldstein's funeral was a 24-year-old Orthodox Jew named Yigal Amir. Like Goldstein, an extremist who opposed the peace process. Amir saw Goldstein not as a murderer, but as a martyr for the Jewish people and an inspiration. At Goldstein's funeral, Yigal Amir decided that, in his words, he had to save the nation.
I just put him in the same basket in which I put a suicide bomber of Hamas, which means a fanatic religious person who does his act for political purposes.
Noah Rothman, Rabin's granddaughter, was a teenager at the time. Did he express concerns? Were you concerned about his safety from within Israel?
No, we were never concerned. The feeling was that my grandfather was very much loved among the Israelis. They loved him.
But protests against Rabin's peace deal were often laced with hate. A few rabbis even invoked a medieval Jewish death curse.
It affected somebody like Yigal Amir.
On November 4th, 1995, Yitzhak Rabin attended a peace rally in Tel Aviv. Some 100,000 supporters were there, singing Shir HaShalom, Song of Peace. After Rabin left the stage and walked to his car, Amir moved close to the bodyguards, pulled a gun, and fired. Many believe the peace process died that night as well.
The tragedy, besides our personal tragedy, is that he was stopped in the middle of the way, and we can never know how the end of the path would have been.
Yigal Amir was sentenced to life in prison. Carmi Gilon, chief of Shin Bet, was forced to resign over his agency's failure to protect their prime minister. And to this day, Meir Lapid remembers one brief moment when he learned of Rabin's death.
I asked myself, what do you feel? I asked, you are sorry for a Jewish man who was murdered? You are happy? God forbid. I have no simple answer for that.
When we come back, round zero.
The most contested piece of real estate on the face of the earth.
Inside Africa, in association with the Angolan National Private Investment Agency.
You could call it a blooming business. And for Kenya, it really is. The country is the leading exporter to the European Union. It supplies about 30% of Europe's flowers, making floriculture the second highest foreign exchange earner in Kenya, employing, directly and indirectly, over 1.5 million people. Environmental concerns, along with rising fuel costs, are also moving them into the world of alternative energy. Other companies are also responding. Kenya's leading electric power company says it has shifted its sources from fossil fuel to geothermal and other alternative energy sources, which now compromises over 70%. With an eco-friendly approach to help Kenya's flower industry along, it's a boost that is likely to bloom in Kenya for some time to come.
Change. What does it mean to you? In Angola, change means opening up new opportunities for all to one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It means dynamic industries, successful businesses, sustained growth, and a future built to last. Do you believe in change? We do. Angola. Grow with us.
Every week, your world shifts direction. Who are the people that plot its course?
On Late Edition, you'll meet the minds that move the world.
Join Wolf Blitzer live on CNN to find out where we're heading. Late Edition with Wolf Blitzer, live on CNN.
Explosions in Maputo, demonstrations in Valencia, celebrations in Veracruz, a rocket festival in Bangfai. This video came from CNN viewers around the world. Someone like you with a mobile phone or camera. Wherever you are, being a CNN contributor is as easy as click and send. Just shoot pictures or video and email them to ireport@cnn.com right from your phone. Or go to cnn.com/international and click on iReport. Connect to the news with CNN iReport.
Tomorrow, meet God's Muslim warriors. The fight to make Islamic the only law. And the small extreme fringe that has become the world's nightmare. Tomorrow on CNN.
This is a joyous day for David Haivri. His son Yair is having his bar mitzvah at Jerusalem's holiest site, the Western Wall. With this rite of passage, the 13-year-old is considered old enough to understand and obey Jewish law.
We have our own God-given law. The law is called the Torah. The Torah gives us answers to all aspects of life.
The Torah is paramount in this family because David Haivri is one of God's Jewish warriors. To him, Israel, the land God promised to the Jews, includes all of the occupied territory.
The Arabs have 22 of their own countries. If they want democratic rights, let them go and seek democracy in their own countries.
For Haivri, only one thing mars the bar mitzvah celebration. They are not allowed to pray on the plaza above the wall. which Jews claim as the site of their ancient temple. Muslims also claim it as the site where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven.
This is exclusively for Muslims to pray in, just as any synagogue on earth is for Jewish prayer.
Since the 1967 war, Israeli and Muslim authorities have struck an uneasy balance. Jews at the Western Wall, Muslims on the plaza above.
Why does the Jewish government of Israel not allow Jews to pray on the Temple Mount? It's because they're afraid of the Muslim reaction.
For Jews and Muslims, this is ground zero.
How is it going, Mr. President?
Near the end of Bill Clinton's presidency, he came close to brokering a peace deal.
Thank you.
But the talks failed, in part over who would control this 35 acres in Jerusalem. The Palestinians were demanding sovereignty, and even today, senior imams say that the Jews have no historic claim here.
Certainly the temple is not here. It is not anywhere in Palestine. The temple only exists in the illusions of people who speak of it.
One man decided to force the issue. Ariel Sharon, a military leader turned right-wing politician. In September 2000, he decided to visit the Temple Mount, which Muslims call the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary.
I cannot see any possibility for a real peace if Jews were not allowed to go to the holiest place that belonged to them.
But Sharon was not just any politician. As a government minister, he had become one of the settlers' best friends. They gave him the nickname King of Israel, godfather of the settlements.
He knew every single hilltop and every valley in this area, and he was famous for driving out to some godforsaken hilltop, opening up his map, saying, this is public land, and this is where a community should go. And it went.
But to Arabs, Sharon was the devil incarnate. As defense minister, Sharon presided over Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon. Sharon was widely blamed for allowing a Lebanese Christian militia to massacre Palestinians at the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps near Beirut.
So you have this incredibly controversial figure, deeply despised on the Arab side, visiting the most contested piece of real estate on the face of the earth.
Sharon, with one eye on becoming prime minister, arrived with other right-wing politicians and 1,000 police. He denied it was a provocation.
I came here with a message of peace. I believe that we can live together with the Palestinians.
When Ariel Sharon goes up to the Temple Mount and he says, I'm a Jew, I'm going to the Temple Mount, to our holiest place, that's a Kiddush Hashem. That's a sanctification of God's name.
But to Muslims, it was an assault on Islam, and violence broke out. Israeli soldiers responded with rubber-coated bullets. At least 4 Palestinians were killed.
One incident at the Temple Mount at Haram al-Sharif has the power of an incident 500 times larger anywhere else. And certainly one person getting killed has the power of 500 people getting killed anywhere else. The fact that that incident happened at a place like that, a place with such symbolic power for both sides, meant that it had incredible power to light a fire.
The fire grew. Each side blamed the other. Israelis turned to a leader with a strongman image. Ariel Sharon's strategy had worked, and he was elected Prime Minister.
I think Sharon had every right to go on to the Temple Mount as a Jew. And if part of his motivation was to open up the doors for a freer Jewish access to the Temple Mount, and yes, for our ability to pray, then I only wish that more prime ministers and Israeli politicians since then have taken similar steps.
Politics and piety had once again collided. God's Jewish warriors now had a friend in the highest office in the land. But the conflict was growing. When we come back, a radical wing of God's Jewish warriors wants revenge.
It's not a plan I need to think about. You just go into a house and shoot.
But why target innocent schoolgirls? And later, why Jewish settlers and Israeli soldiers are at war.
Tomorrow, meet God's Muslim warriors. The fight to make Islamic the only law. And the small extreme fringe that has become the world's nightmare. Tomorrow on CNN.
We want to teach healing out of unwanted homosexuality.
Getting rid of gay.
These two things and these two things, they just don't fit.
They say it's a cure for homosexuality.
We want kids to know you can choose.
But is it a con?
It's a fraud. They're destroying families. It's an absolute tragedy.
They tell you to become more masculine as a guy by calling your friends a dude.
I accuse the ex-gay movement of being complicit with murder.
Gay conversion, only on CNN.
This week on Talk Asia, we're with the acclaimed Hong Kong director Andrew Lau as we revisit the pivotal scene of his most famous movie, Infernal Affairs.
So many people say, you are the savior of the Hong Kong film industry. I say, no, this is my luck.
And we find out what he thinks on Hollywood's take on his baby.
People ask me, do you like Departed? I say, 50-50.
Join me, Anjali Rao, for Talk Asia, only on CNN.
There is a place where words and pictures from around the globe come together to form a unique picture of our world. A place of unforgettable images and engaging stories. That place is CNN Traveler magazine, with stunning photographic news reviews, inspiring features, and exclusive contributions from CNN's unrivaled journalists. Subscribe at cnntraveler.com. CNN Traveler, on sale now.
Thousands have fled this country.
This soldier's trying to positively identify the gunman.
Saddam Hussein faced his final moments. As the chapters in the story of Iraq continue to unfold, stay with CNN.
This is CNN.
Intifada. In Arabic, it means shaking off. And beginning in September 2000, Palestinians turned increasingly to suicide bombs in the Second Intifada to shake off Israeli occupation and strike at the Jewish state.
I've buried many friends who have been murdered by Arabs.
David Haivri, a West Bank settler, believes the proper response is revenge.
There's a concept of God's revenge being a sign of justice.
Ha'ivri is a disciple of Rabbi Meir Kahana, the right-wing extremist who referred to Arabs as dogs.
If you ask me if I'm an extremist, I wouldn't think so. I think that I'm in the middle of the line, a regular, simple Jew.
Like Kahana, Ha'ivri believes the Arabs should either leave the West Bank and Israel or be expelled.
As long as they're here, there's a threat to the settlement movement.
Israel banned Kahana's political movement as a terrorist organization after one of his followers murdered at least 29 Muslim worshippers in Hebron. Kahana himself was later gunned down in New York by a Muslim extremist. But his heated mix of right-wing politics and religious fundamentalism lived on. During the Second Intifada, as Israeli buses, restaurants and markets were being attacked, a poll showed 25% of Israelis saying Meir Kahana could be a good leader for the Jewish people. The most militant were talking revenge.
I would say that maybe a few hundreds would make a terror act. Very small number. It doesn't mean that it's easy to get them.
This is the West Bank settlement of Bat Ain. Here, a small group of Jews wants to re-establish the biblical kingdom of David, a monarchy built on religious law.
A kingdom would be unlike this rotten democracy. A king would be loyal to one thing, to what God tells him, to what is written in the Torah.
The Bat Ain group believed in revenge against Palestinians, which they described to an Israeli filmmaker.
If they damaged an orchard, you damaged 10. 2 eyes for an eye, teeth for a tooth.
And then they escalated.
From a desire to scare the Arabs off, you get to attempted murder. All the way. Big time.
To make a big-time statement, they chose this target, a Palestinian girls' school in East Jerusalem.
One brings the car, one brings the explosives, one takes care of the clock, one lays the bomb, and that's how it works.
They built a bomb in this trailer with propane tanks, barrels of gasoline, homemade shrapnel, and stolen military explosives to set it off. The crude timer was set for 7:30 a.m., when children would just be arriving for class.
Whoever gets hurt, gets hurt.
Jewish terror to match Palestinian terror.
Just like they do.
Late one spring night in 2002, the men from Bat Ain drove the trailer to East Jerusalem.
We got there about 3 a.m. and then it got complicated because that night a police car happened to be in the area.
They told the police they were just passing through and then continued on to their true destination, the Palestinian school.
After we unhitched the wagon, we were going to puncture a tire so it wouldn't look suspicious, but we forgot. With all the pressure, we completely forgot. And after we'd driven about 200 yards, I told Yarden, hey, we forgot to puncture the tire. So he drove back.
The police, watching from a distance, arrested them. Interrogators asked why they did it. The answer, it was God's will.
There's no way to explain it. I feel as if God grabbed me by the ears.
In court, the men claim the bomb was just to scare Palestinians, that it was not intended to explode. But they were found guilty of attempted murder and sent to prison for as long as 15 years. Mainstream settlers like Hanan Porat condemn them.
Religious belief as a fuel for violence is wrong.
But David Haivri does not condemn them.
No, I made no judgment. In my opinion, war is an ugly thing.
When we come back, God's Jewish warriors go to war against fellow Jews.
Tomorrow, meet God's Muslim warriors. The fight to make Islamic the only law. And the small extreme fringe that has become the world's nightmare. Tomorrow on CNN. Business is more than just a game of numbers. To be on top, it takes leadership.
Have to be comfortable with your own decisions.
Motivation.
Do something that you believe in, that you want to do, rather than something that you think is just going to make money.
And that indefinable something.
You will have to have the core of it inside of yourself.
Get inside the minds of the world's business leaders and learn from their experience. Take your seat in the boardroom. Only on CNN.
This week on Talk Asia, we're with the acclaimed Hong Kong director Andrew Lau as we revisit the pivotal scene of his most famous movie, Infernal Affairs.
So many people say, you are the savior of the Hong Kong film industry. I say, no, this is my luck.
And we find out what he thinks on Hollywood's take on his baby.
People ask me, do you like Departed? I say, 50-50.
Join me, Anjali Rao, for Talk Asia, only on CNN.
Every day, CNN comes across extraordinary people making a difference. We call them CNN heroes. Go to cnn.com/heroes to see what a real hero looks like or nominate one you know. CNN Heroes.
Coming in September on CNN. Business in the Middle East. It's transforming and it's growing. Track the changes with CNN's newest business show, Marketplace Middle East. Be the change through weblogs and video diaries. Extraordinary young men and women record their experiences as they aim to benefit others. Richard is on a quest for rock and roll with lessons in rock attitude from Motley Crue's Nikki Sixx and legend Alice Cooper. In September, stay connected. Stay with CNN.
We want to teach healing out of unwanted homosexuality.
Getting rid of gay.
These two things and these two things, they just don't fit.
They say it's a cure for homosexuality.
We want kids to know you can choose.
But is it a con?
It's a fraud. They're destroying families. It's an absolute tragedy.
They tell you to become more masculine as a guy by calling your friends a dude.
I accuse the ex-gay movement of being complicit with murder.
Gay conversion, only on CNN.
The Second Intifada paralyzed the peace process. So in December 2003, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon announced a radical new policy. In the absence of negotiations, he said Israel would unilaterally wall off the Jewish settlements it intended to keep and shut down the others, returning that land to the Palestinians.
The disengagement plan will reduce friction between us and the Palestinians.
Many settlers were appalled that their ally, the godfather of the settlements, would abandon what they had worked so hard to build.
I felt it's worse than our enemies. He was like the hand of the terrorists to do their ideologies. It was terrible.
Phase 1 of the plan, Gaza. The government offered the Gaza settlers financial compensation, and most left without incident.
There were many people in the settlement movement who saw this as a disgrace, who were angry and disappointed with their own leaders for not mounting a more serious resistance.
There were holdouts in Gaza. They would be physically evicted. Some settlers begged Israeli soldiers not to do it.
He has to be a Jewish person first and then a soldier. It's not moral to take from someone his house.
In August 2005, the hard-line Gaza settlers made their stand. Jewish settlers versus Jewish soldiers. The final confrontation was ugly, but within hours, it was over. 9,000 settlers were now gone, but another confrontation over 9 houses was in the making. It would be in the tiny community of Amona, atop a windy hill on the occupied West Bank. For religious settlers like Idit Levinger, living here is spiritual.
I walk around here with my children and tell them this is the hill that Abraham climbed. This is where Jacob had his dream. It's not something that was once upon a time. It's alive and now.
Amona was founded in 1995, despite what was then the Israeli government's stated policy, no new settlements.
It was the same kind of process that went back in the 70s. They had officials who were sympathetic, who would help them out. And then these little clumps of mobile homes sprung up all over the West Bank, over 100 of them.
According to an official investigation, for more than a decade, government ministries spent millions on the unauthorized outposts by bypassing procedure and violating Israeli law.
And then at a few of them, the settlers said, okay, we're here, the government hasn't pulled us out, let's start building houses.
9 of these permanent houses were built for 9 Amona families living in cramped trailers. Among them, Idit Levinger's.
I feel I'm part of these hills. I can't see myself living without them.
But Peace Now, an Israeli organization that opposes the settlements, wanted the 9 houses torn down. Dror Etkes filed a lawsuit arguing that the Amona homes did not have official permits and that they were built on privately owned Palestinian land.
There's no law there. I mean, there is one law. This is the law of the occupier. If you're stronger, you grab, you take.
The settlers' response? They had a legitimate deal with nearby Palestinians who feared for their lives if the transaction were ever made public.
Our land was bought and paid for. The Arab owners got their money.
But the court ruled that the 9 permanent homes were illegal and ordered them demolished. On February 1st, 2006, thousands of protesters and thousands of security forces came to Amona. Both sides prepared for confrontation. As Israeli soldiers and riot police moved forward, violence erupted. Demonstrators were beaten. Soldiers and police were pelted with rocks.
We wanted to protest the demolition, but nobody intended to harm anyone.
No one was killed, but there were more than 200 casualties, soldiers and settlers. All this over 9 houses on a tiny plot of land.
We didn't think there'd be so much violence. This was a civil war.
The battle ended with the 9 homes torn down. But God's Jewish warriors had sent a message. Evict us from the West Bank, and it'll rip Israeli society apart.
That social conflict is the biggest problem that Israel would have in pulling out. Confronting tens of thousands of people whose deepest belief, who the very meaning of their life is invested in remaining in those settlements.
Idit Levinger's new home is now rubble. But her family and the others remain in their old trailers.
My bond with this place is far more than a house.
But the majority of Israelis would trade settlements for a lasting peace. And Dror Etkes promises more lawsuits.
Basically, everywhere where there is a red, it's considered as private Palestinian land.
He says that while religious settlers took land from their Palestinian neighbors, Israeli officials looked the other way.
This is not politics. This is theology. Theology belongs to the Muslim, religious centers, to the yeshiva, to the Jewish religious study centers. It doesn't belong to modern political system.
Israel became a nation after its 1948 War of Independence. In the ceasefire, Jerusalem was divided, the western part for Jews, the eastern part for Arabs. 19 years later, in the Six-Day War, Israel captured the Arab side of the city and declared it part of the Jewish state. But the Palestinians want East Jerusalem for the capital of their own future nation.
Jerusalem is the locus of a bitter, sometimes bloody and nasty national conflict.
But surely the Israeli interest... Danny Seiderman is an American-born Israeli, a Jew, a Zionist, and a lawyer who defends Palestinian property rights. He worries that turning a fight over land into a fight over religion makes compromise impossible.
We will be transforming the conflict into a combination of Armageddon, Jihad, Holy War, Sons of Darkness and Sons of Light, precisely at the time when the interface between Islam, the Arab world, and the West is not exactly user-friendly.
The 40-year tug of war over Jerusalem began when Israel bulldozed the Arab neighborhood next to the Western Wall and built a plaza where Jews now pray. Many of the Palestinians who lived there were moved to this UN refugee camp on the edge of Jerusalem. It's called Shofat. And here they remain refugees in their own city.
The Palestinians want to live in their homeland. We do not want to remain displaced for the rest of our lives.
Musen Nache, a former businessman, is raising 8 children here. There is no regular garbage service. Sewage runs through his backyard.
Animals live a better life than ours.
To go to other parts of the city, Shofat residents must navigate a crowded checkpoint run by Israeli soldiers.
They put the whole Palestinian people in prisons. We're not allowed to move freely. It is hard to go out or to get to work.
And even his home is threatened by this. Israel calls it a security fence to keep out terrorists. Palestinians call it the apartheid wall.
2 years ago, they came and opened up the route for the wall. It was 70 meters from my house.
The Israeli government wanted to demolish Natche's home to build the wall. He had 1 week to get out. Desperate, he took drastic action, documented by a local filmmaker.
I prepared the gas tank. If they come near me, I will blow myself up.
Whenever he saw the bulldozer coming, Natche chained himself to his roof every day for a year, while his lawyer fought the demolition in court. The government ended up building the wall behind the house, but his case is still tied up in court, and his house is still threatened.
We hope that genuine peace prevails in this country. They say that we are terrorists, but who brought us to this place? People are on the brink of hell.
Danny Seideman is Natche's lawyer. He says that while the massive concrete wall may reduce terrorism, it may also backfire.
The same tool that we're using to prevent a suicide bomber from entering this side is going to radicalize them. We're cutting them off from their hinterland. We're making their lives miserable.
In other Palestinian neighborhoods, this is some of the property a Jewish organization called Ateret Kohanim has bought from Arabs over the past 25 years to settle, it claims, more than 800 Jewish families.
I believe that God is bringing back the Israeli people to Holy Land and to Jerusalem as part of the redemption.
This man, who asked not to be identified, is Ateret Kohanim's security chief.
We have guards and so on to be careful, and I have my gun.
Despite Palestinian protests and riots, these Jews believe God wants a united, not a divided, Jerusalem.
Jerusalem is our capital. The all Israeli land is our land. And it's not because we say, because God says.
I believe this will come down.
As I walked along the separation barrier with Danny Seideman, he explained why separation is virtually impossible. The holy sites for Jews, Muslims, and Christians are virtually on top of one another.
God is a local resident here. That's something that the city knows how to do. If only the politicians were wise enough to flesh this out into the appropriate political arrangements, this would be the most remarkable place on the face of the earth.
Jerusalem is a remarkable place, and political solutions require compromise. But too often for God's Jewish warriors and their Palestinian counterparts, compromise means capitulation. And they are not alone. For millions of people around the world, religion is politics. They fear modern society is trampling all over their beliefs. Join me tomorrow night when the stakes are raised. We meet God's Muslim warriors. Islam has become a powerful political force, but for a few, terror has become the weapon of choice. I'm Christiane Amanpour. Thank you for joining me.